Hello.
Hello.
Oh, great. You can hear me. It's
Not sure where everybody is. I guess it is still a little early.
good. Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Where's evening for you? Where are you based
Uh,
out of?
I'm
Uh,
wishing you a good evening. I'm in
ah,
Boston.
okay, so not evening for you. That's why I was like, oh, another American overseas, is it? I
Not
didn't
yet.
know where you were based. Not yet. Interesting.
That would be
Interesting.
nice, but that's a long way away.
Yeah, fair enough. And hi, Ryan. How you doing?
Hi, Beam.
Righty. Usually waiting for everyone to shuffle between Zoom rooms. We'll give it another minute or two. I like to kick off about or just before the 5 minute mark. Not punish people for getting here on time too badly, but acknowledge that there's some rolling. Feel free if there's anything you want to discuss to throw it on the list. We're gonna prioritize conversations around the tag reboot because I know there's a lot of questions there, but that doesn't mean it has to take up the full hour. So if you have anything that you wanted to announce or share or discuss, please do add it to the document. I'll share it here in the chat for those that don't have it open yet. Alrighty. As I said, I try not to penalize being on time too badly so we can get kicked off. As always, we just start with an opportunity for anyone to say hi. If you're a new face and you want to say hi to the group, it's particularly helpful just to share what attracted you to the group and to come today in case anyone has any work that's ongoing and can pull you in if it's something that would align with your interests. So just a quick 10 to 20-second hello if anyone would like to take the time. Alrighty, fair enough. Great. So as I said, as we were all rolling in today, I wanted to spend as much time today as we needed to talk through the most recent TOC announcements around how they're looking at how tags can support the next kind of 10 years of cloud native, right? We all just celebrated with lots of parties around Kubernetes and the CNCF for 10 years, but it's not going anywhere, and we want to make sure we're supporting the next 10 years. So I see some faces that I've seen in other meetings I've been in about this, but also I'm sure that some people haven't had the kind of the lowdown or the information. So I'm going to pull up the slide deck quickly that they used to introduce this at the most recent TOC meeting, just to share some of the content from them directly, and then we can talk about how that relates to this working group in particular. So before I jump into that, is there anything that people have that's urgent or that they want to speak about first? Yes, and thank you, Tiffany. I will start there in describing in more detail what TOC stands for, but you got it exactly right. So thank you for sharing that. All right. All right, I will share the doc. So as Tiffany so nicely translated my acronym for me, the TOC stands for Technical Oversight Committee. And the way I've been describing this is you can think of when you're in a big enough organization, you essentially have an office of the CTO. You have a set of people. It's hard to scale one human to CTO an entire organization at certain scales, and so you end up with a group of people who bring with them a set of specialties, set of skills, and a more broad view of the world around them to be able to support that initiative of leading the technology department of that large organization. At the end of the day, the CNCF is a large technology organization, right? It has a lot of projects that it supports, a lot of end user groups, and we know that Chris is the CTO, but leans on the technical oversight committee or the TOC or the talk. You might hear it under those different phrasings to make sure that there's coverage across all the work that the CNCF is doing. But at the scale of the CNCF, the TOC or the talk even looks to further make sure that they have the right kind of expertise and breadth of awareness in place to be able to support everything that's going on. So what they've introduced or what they had introduced years ago was the TAG or Technical Advisory Group mechanism. And the technical advisory groups are more specialized groups. They have distinct specialties. So there was historically tag app delivery, which was the one that we're a part of. There's security, there's observability, there's a lot of different topics that you might sound familiar to you in kind of technology divisions around what you look at and projects. The revisit of the structure of the tags or the technical advisory groups has been something that's actually been in discussion for years, from my understanding, without anything being concrete or clear as to what that might look like. And part of the reason for that is it's so disruptive and so challenging to get right at this scale. But I give them the TOC a lot of credit that, like, at some point, if everyone's identifying gaps and challenges, like, you got to take a stab and try and make things better and then roll with it, right? And that's sort of the stage we're in now. So I'll be describing throughout the next couple minutes, like, where the TOC has described the next evolution of tags to go, understanding that they too are working through this right now. And we're going to all be learning as we go, and we're going to be identifying gaps and identifying opportunities and challenges and overcoming them. So just so you know, there's no one in the room here who thinks that everything is solved. It's purely a step forward and a way of solving some of the challenges. So one of the key things I want to call out for our working group is that the TOC's initial approval for or creation of these tags years ago was these three key points, which was around scaling that leadership. So they said large organization, lots of moving parts. How do we learn and support that? And then specifically in the next two bullet points on these topics. So expert guidance to the specific projects, the end users in relation to specific projects, and technology gaps in that project ecosystem. So for those of you that have been around the working group for a while, I've been with the working group now for 2.5 years. I would say that we do a lot of focus on end users, very little focus on the projects. And that's one of the things that is a bit of a gap between what was the desired state when originally creating tags and the current state, which is what's one of the reasons why there's value in revisiting what is the intention of these tags, what do we want to get from them, and how do we structure in that way, right? And so the TOC was redoing the tags for a number of reasons. As I just laid out, one of the reasons that is most applicable to our working group experience is that lack of kind of connection to the project ecosystem, and wanting to make sure that we get back in touch with that. It's also that lack of like chain from TOC through to working group, right? We are, as a working group, as leads or chairs of the working group, we're in tight connection with the tag leads, but we don't, as individuals, spend a lot of time going across the working groups within the tag app delivery. And that's something that we had identified in the past in both Paris and Salt Lake City. We had conversations about it, and we had intentions to improve that situation. But it's not just us that have been going through this. There's 8 tags. Each of them have a number of working groups, and these are trends that we are seeing across the CNCF, and that's why the desire to sort of look through different ways of organizing to try and make that overarchingly better across the organization. So, yeah, so they say for the next 10 years, and this was one of the slides that I think definitely was interesting to me, not something I had quite put numbers to before, but when you think about where the CNCF was when it first felt it needed to put in structure around technical oversight, there were, 30 or so different projects in some state in the CNCF. We're now at over 200, right? Or about 200. So that's a very different scale. And if you've ever been through an organization that scales, it tends to go in bands, right? You can get up to about 25 people kind of making things up in a certain way. And then you need to put in a scale that's going to get you to a couple hundred. Then you're going to put in a scale that gets you to a couple thousand, and so on. So we're just sort of feeling that pressure right now. The CNCF is to realize that the scale has changed fundamentally, and therefore so we may need to revisit some of our processes. So the thing that's going to happen is that there's been a consolidation and a reworking of the tags. There's going to be less overall tags. So we're going to go from 8 to 5, which is going to reduce the strain on administration. So a lot of the chair responsibility at whether it be the working group or the tag or the talk level is around administration, connecting people, setting up meetings, making sure the right people are in the room together, tracking projects to make sure that they are getting the right level of scrutiny before release because it is under the umbrella of CNCF and so on. So having less tags will reduce the amount of admin across them and also reduce the number of humans that need to take on those administrative roles, right? So we're struggling sometimes to keep people in those roles. It can create burnout. It can, as people change jobs and change circumstances, we see churn in those roles that creates a lot of disruption. So that's one benefit. The other side is just a revisiting of what the cloud native ecosystem looks like, and therefore what the TOC from their vantage point view as valuable expertise areas of expertise to put focus on, and how those have shifted from the past and how those should be organized with a little bit of experience now in this first round of running tags. So a couple things that are happening. So the first thing is that we're still going to have technical advisory groups. Just that is still part of the structure. The technical advisory groups are still domain experts underneath the TOC and in service of the TOC's goals. And they're still going to be focused around how to connect the ecosystem, so the projects within the CNCF, with the people that use them, and making sure that the projects are adhering to high value work for end users and for the general kind of industry of cloud native and of technology. That hasn't changed. What has changed is that we've introduced two new terms called subprojects and initiatives in lieu of the term working group. So you'll see that subproject has a bit of a similar feel to a working group. So we'll talk a bit about that. An initiative has a similar feel to the pieces of work that we've been doing. So the platform engineering model, platform engineering maturity model, or the platform white paper would be examples of initiatives that might get done. The interesting part here is, though, that an initiative does not have to live is not long lived in nature. It is a piece of work that can be picked up, completed, and moved on from, versus where we've been as a working group with a long lived kind of group with evolving projects as we go. So it's one of the big differences. So there's a bit more detail in here, and I've got this all linked. So it's in our group meeting today, so you can read through all the specific details. But just know that we're trying to get this out basically up to, including, and just after London. So there won't be any major changes coming into London. There will be a maintainer summit that first week in April, the first day of April, I think. The last day of March, I guess. Last day of March here in London during KubeCon, to have some conversations about how this will look in practice. And it will be getting rolled out, though, according to that and those learnings. So that's kind of the timeline. So here are, as I say, the structures. So the TOC still lives. It's still the governing board of the CNCF projects and maintaining the technical vision for the organization. The technical advisory groups still live. They are still long-lived, and they are still focused on a specific domain with a deeper expertise within that domain. Entered into the conversation is this concept of sub-projects, which is an interesting choice to change the word from working group to sub-project, because it's not a group that is working towards an initiative, right? It's a group that is doing long-lived, ongoing work. And there's a couple examples that I'll show, might as well just show now. I think it'll be a bit easier. For example, the project reviews sub-project. So this is a long-lived piece of work that the TOC requires to be successful in their initiatives. And the reason that this would be a sub-project to be long-lived is because project reviews are constant. We saw there's 200 something projects in the CNCF. They are getting reviewed annually for whether or not they are meeting CNCF expectations. And they're reviewed semi-regularly for potential move between levels. And there are constantly more projects applying. So this is something that needs to have a consistent progress on, and it's long-lived in nature. The other example of a long-lived project is the contributor strategy. And this is, again, something that is viewed as never-ending and needing that sort of constant oversight and constant group. The TOC is going to lead both of these. You can see the leadership is by the TOC, and it's going to be encouraging a very high rotation rate of leads, so that people who have domain expertise are rotating into this rather than contributing strategy and project reviews being a domain expertise in its own right, right? So you're getting people who kind of are bringing their experiences into it. So those would be the long-lived or permanent projects. The other side of things is the individual projects, like the initiatives. These would be like the white papers that need to be written, the investigations that we want to run, things like that need a spurt of energy, but are intending to create an output of value and then provide that value and sort of step back from it, let that live in the ecosystem, see how that evolves, possibly come back for V2, possibly not, things like that. And as you can see, those can be run by either the tag, by a specific tag, or by the TOC, depending on it. But they're very focused on it being objective focused and very narrow in scope, so that basically it's something that can easily be determined as being on the rails or off the rails. Getting the value that the group is trying to provide, or failing to do so due to either a change in expectations or change in availability of people or whatever reason, and being able to keep tabs on that. So I've now been droning on for long enough. Is there any questions about those those shapes that exist in the ecosystem with this new change? Marsh, I see a nod. Is that a yes to a question?
Well, yeah, look, this stuff is hard, and I'm already peppering you with comments in the chat, and
Oh, I
it's
don't even
not
know
fair because I know you're doing your best to represent the change and why it's happening, and I appreciate that. So if I sound jaded a bit, it's because this stuff is hard, and we're not a working group like other working groups. I don't think we're organized around the same kinds of principles, and I don't see us in any of the names of these things here either. So I don't have a solution. I'm just, maybe it's just that change is hard. I don't think that's the case. I would like to be able to talk about the work we do in a way that, I don't know, has the kind of gravity of what we are all involved in. I just don't know how to describe it.
Yep, I hear you. And to be clear, just because it might not just be because change is hard, and trying to separate the two from what is hard because it's change and what is hard because it's not quite meeting expectations or fitting our needs, is the hard work we're doing right now, right? In trying to decipher that. So that is fair.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments or?
I also struggle because I don't understand the new names of other things, but there's a developer experience tag and there's a developer experience group in that. I find that to be confusing, and it feels like developer experience is a long running topic that is broadly applicable across many kinds of projects. And so I don't understand what the logic is around why platforms would be different than developer experience and how they're not the same in the first place on some level.
I'm gonna put a small pin in that one, only because I haven't yet talked
sure,
about the exact names. I hear
My
you,
bad.
and we'll definitely talk on that. But I just I haven't shown the names yet, so for those that haven't skipped ahead, I want to make sure we talk through this if there's any questions. Stefan, I saw your hand raised as well, though. Then you disappeared on me somewhere. Oh, you've got Zoom mute.
Yeah, it was related to the same topic, so I waited.
Fair enough. Well then, okay, so the last thing I was just going to call out is I didn't mention the community groups, but that is another domain that already exists, and the TOC is calling out as something that we can and should leverage, which is a way to create communities of conversation on topics that are valuable and shared across. So we'll talk more about all of these in a minute, but I will come down to the layout. So the layout is that there is an initiative right now around AI, which is going to be pulling together the current AI work under the TOC and making sure it kind of covers and crosses over the necessary technical domains that it needs to, because that's been a difficulty with it living in its own tag. Not sure how it's been connected up with some things. So this is going to give it a lot more kind of access to being across the CNCF. The two sub projects I mentioned, and then these 5 tags. The point that Marsh was raising is that those tags are being described on this slide. And this is one of the slides that's the most confusing to people, because if you weren't in the call where the TOC introduced this to us, it may come across like these are working groups, that the non-bold items are working groups under the bolded tag titles. That is not the case. So, and I totally get how that portrays in the visual, but the bold is the tags. So these are the 5 names, but the items underneath there within the boxes are there as examples of things that tag may have a specialty in, a worry about, initiatives being created around, and oversight of across the CNCF project base. So for example, if we go to tag security and compliance, they have security hygiene. One of the things that they do, that they've historically done in the security tag, is that they've done security reviews of projects. like there isn't a specific security review kind of working group underneath this, but the hygiene of projects, security implementations is one of the kind of concerns of that tag. And they may choose to continue to do security reviews, or they may choose to like not worry about, but engage with security hygiene through other activities. And that's sort of for that tag to determine based on their experiences. So the only other thing, Marsh, I heard you say was the kind of concern over the question mark around the tag developer experience title. So the other thing I'll share from just being in other calls about this is that is probably the tag that has the most parentheses naming is hard around it of all of the tags, right? So, and that is coming from TOC members, right? So this is not something that like is purely a groundswell of frustration. It's actually a hard job to name these things. They acknowledge that may not be the perfect name for that. They're open to different names, more so than to different covering area covers, right? So if you can imagine like the topics that are within that green box being called under a different name, like they would be, I think that would be an open conversation to be had. So yes, now that we have the files up here, Marsh.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Actually, I would suggest that there is another vertical box next to tag security and compliance, which is developer experience, and that things like platform engineering fall under that. And I could imagine some other topics that fall under that too. They are cross-cutting concerns that apply across all kinds of projects, and they're about how these things fit together. And that, I think, is a better way to frame what we do.
I got really confused when I saw developer experience being a focus, right, and being a tag in its own right, and nothing for platform. And the one thing that sprung to my mind in one of the comments that I made, Abby, was really around, you know, the CNCF seeding ground to some of the private individuals. It got me thinking back to Salt Lake and the whole, there's a certification for platform engineering. That seems to have disappeared. I don't know if anyone else in the group has had any follow-on contact. I was just looking in my mail there. I haven't seen it since. So we had good conversation, good collaboration on that. And then it seemed to just go quiet. And now all the focus seems to be on developer experience, but you've announced certification. And if you've announced certification as a thing, where does that sit in this structure? There's no clear home for that.
I will just say that is still moving forward. I believe I am not involved in that project, but I'm aware that Amy June is moving forward with that. So if that's something that you haven't had any reach out about, but you had raised your hand and would like to be involved in, Amy June from the Linux Foundation is the right person, and I'm happy to help make that connection. So I realize that was only a sub point of what you were saying there, Chris. I just wanted to
clarify. No, and to be fair, I mean, I'm looking at Amy June's the last message which we were sharing was back in November. So I don't think it actually moved on anywhere. So I'm going to reach out to her today. But you know, it just got me thinking about that whole concept, Abby, that the CNCF announced it. They made a lot of noise about it. And now they seem to be seeding the ground, and they basically pushed platform engineering just to be a talk. I don't want to call it a talking shop, but you know what a community group, right?
Yep.
And yet they're pushing certification. If it's something that has certification, surely it's higher up the stack, right, in terms of the visibility, and not
so
just hidden away again.
So two things that so absolutely, I hear you. So first of all, I do know that things have happened since November. I've heard from Amy June this year within the last few weeks about things. So again, I'm aware, but I am not involved. So definitely just reiterating, if you aren't aware or involved and you're interested, Amy June is the person, and I'm very happy to connect. And I don't know exactly where they're at, and I know it's still early days, but they are definitely still moving forward. So just be aware of that. Secondly, yeah, I hear you on the platform engineering. I have some ideas that are worth having maybe a conversation about, but I don't want to like start with solutions. I want to start with hearing, right? I want to hear what you all are thinking, what the challenges are, what the frustrations are, what the opportunities are, and then we can go from there. So I believe I spoke right through someone else who was raising their hand. Sorry, I see you, Stefan, but was it someone else?
Yes, that's Stefan. I just wanted to add, I heard about it in end of January, and they're still continuing with the certification.
Yeah. Cool.
I think my point on this one, sorry, just before we proceed to someone else, was that, you know, they focused on the developer experience, and that is one persona. Why have we got a whole tag that's based on one persona when there's benefits for so many others? And you know, that's kind of almost federated into now we need to be members of or attending developer experience, tag infrastructure, tag security and compliance, operational resilience. You know, it's kind of scattered.
Stefan, I think I see you as well, and then Blake. Zoom mute again. Sorry.
It's late. Yeah, I wanted to ask, was platform engineering directly mentioned in the discussions at all? Because or, is it supposed to fit into one of those or not? Because what I understand is that the tags are they are supposed to be what is under the CNCF vision. So my understanding from this is platform engineering is not part of the CNCF vision, or not anymore. And what is has it been communicated anything in that direction?
So platform engineering was not raised on the TOC's call. Specifically, it's been raised in the issues like around how will the tags be organized. It was brought up there by people within the tag app delivery. As for vision, I think that's an interesting question. That's one of those things I can go back and try and gain more information on and report back on, because I think it might be that it's within the vision, just at a different abstraction level, right? And that's sort of my optimistic view on this, is that it's not that platform engineering has disappeared as an important concept. Like, as we said, it's still going forward as a training course. It's still, you know, the most popular Colo Day, as announced by Chris, the CTO of the CNCF. It's aware of the sort of popularity and the impact of platform engineering. But when we look at the kind of abstractions of what does a tag do, and what are they trying to achieve, is platform engineering at that abstraction level is sort of one of the questions I think is worth talking to the TOC about and understanding, because they may have a different vision for where platform engineering can live. So good question.
I guess I can go ahead.
Just to finish, sorry. Then else I would say I agree with what Chris said. That I would see it as a pillar on the side here as well.
Yep, I hear that. Yep.
So sorry, Blake. Yeah.
No, you're good. I was gonna say, I wonder if it makes more sense to have it as an initiative, because the way I'm reading initiatives, it's really this cross-cutting thing across multiple tags, which I think in the platform engineering world, maybe not initiative, sub-project. Yeah, sub-project was what I think I was thinking of. But because it's so cross-cutting between DevX, it's between, you know, it's similar to AI, right? It impacts, I think, a lot of what I think we're going to be doing in the cloud native space, that to me, it almost seems really like a sub project where what you're doing in your platform engineering space has broad impacts as to how you're dealing with DevX or operational, I forget what the other one was, operational resiliency or security and compliance and all those sorts of things. Like, I think platform engineering cuts across all of those, that I think saying it's a part of DevX isn't quite fair to it. But I also understand the argument, like, it's not really a tag, because I don't know how I don't think what we've done in the working group historically really talks to a tag. I think it really is more this kind of, sub project of, right, this cross-cutting thing that's changing the way we're even doing cloud native development in all the areas of cloud native, computing.
Yeah, and I think so I think that's sort of where I stand as well. And I hear echoes of what you're saying, Blake, in what Chris was saying and in what Stefan was saying, and around it being its own kind of vertical underpinning across all of this kind of thing. The fact that platform engineering isn't on this page can be viewed as, well, did you forget about it? Or it can be viewed as it is an implementation technique across these things, right? And so you can think of, like, would you want to have a tag, if we rewind 10 years, would you have wanted to have a tag called DevOps? right? All the debates of like, is DevOps a role or a way of working and or a mindset or whatever. I think platforms are an implementation. Platform engineering is a way of working, a way of thinking, a way of addressing things, right? And so that's one of those questions, right? I don't want to say what was in their minds when they were writing this. I don't want to say what will transpire as we progress in this change, but I think that's something that we can investigate, I guess, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I even think in this diagram, right, I would more align to the diagram on the previous slide where, next to AI, right above it or right below it, right, is that initiative for platform engineering or sub-project under contributor strategy for platform engineering. I think it may fit more in initiative, but I don't know, the wording doesn't quite work well for me.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah, I was kind of coming back on something that you just said. I think a lot of the focus comes across as being about software projects and really being about, the software projects on the landscape. It was 30, it's now 200, and we've got to change the subject. And the focus is all on kind of software projects, whereas really what we're talking about is an initiative. It's an enabler. It's not, it's not a project, right? And them not having a place for it in that model because their focus has been thinking about software projects. And I do think the landscape needs to extend and not just think about individual bits of software, but the other stuff that goes around the landscape as well. And there needs to be a place for that. Pushing it down to simply being, community groups is not the right level, because you're not, I think the key word that I read on one of the slides was leadership. And pushing it down, that one, right? No leadership in a community group. That means kind of a lot of the stuff that, the initiatives type stuff we've been working on, that is leadership. It must be higher up the stack of this. If talk is at the top and community groups are at the bottom, then a lot of the work we've been doing in the leadership space is higher than the community group. And somehow, the people who are focused on software are not seeing that. It did come across, and I'm going to be a bit critical here. I don't mean to be, but I think it has to be said. It did come across that some of the biases on the talk call were very much from a software development perspective. At least that's how I interpreted it. And it was all about projects. It was all about software. The stuff we're talking about isn't software, which is why it doesn't come on that kind of roadmap, right? But there needs to be a place for it. But why is developer experience there? Right? Are we saying the only developer experience is Backstage because it's the only project in that space?
Think that might not be quite it, but yes, I understand that Backstage has become a strong, popular project to talk about in that space for sure. Okay, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a sub project under tag developer experience because it's related to that, and it's how we enable some of that experience, right? Maybe that is kind of more a sub project is probably better than being in just a community group there.
Yeah, and I think so. That's what I want to talk about a little bit. So Blake, so what I'd like to get to is talking about where we think we can slot in some of the works that we're doing. And so I figure, but Blake, so I didn't mean to. I wanted you to be able to finish off your thought there before we jump into that. But that's sort of my thought for the last kind of 15 minutes or so.
Sure, yeah, I can go real quick. I was gonna say I think DevX is more than just Backstage, right? It's open feature and some of those other things that I think do provide value. I was just gonna ask if we went down the community group path, right? Does platform engineering days go away, or does that get absorbed by DevX? What kind of funding? Because for example, we've done the platform coffees and stuff, and I think those have been really good at some of the KubeCons. But obviously, if we don't have funding from CNCF, I think a lot of those initiatives that, I mean, to be fair, we're reaching out to the community, talking about these things, setting standards for those things. But I think it will hurt some of the causes that we're trying to fight for, or some of the things we're working towards, if there wasn't some sort of ability to at least get CNCF official backing on it.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So we, as the co-chairs, myself and Colin and Atul, met earlier yesterday. Weeks, they just happen these days, man. Yeah, we met yesterday to discuss what we've heard so far, what we think we see, and so forth. And that was actually one of the exercises we did, Blake, was we thought about what is it that we do today? Like when we think about, change is hard. I already said that. And we're going to want it to stay the same because we're happy where we are. But what is it, if we can't stay exactly the same, what is it that we want to, what is it that we're worrying about protecting? What is it that we want to make sure continues on into this new structure? And some of the things you mentioned were there. So first of all, platform coffees, we are getting actually, I'm working right now with the Linux Foundation and CNCF to have a room at the venue. So we are still getting support to run those. We're actually getting more support because it'll be actually on site now. So reduce the kind of challenges of getting places and getting to things and stuff. So that's awesome. And those were always funded through the ambassador program versus through like a formal TOC/tag format. So we're okay there, which is great. Then we talked about like kind of the leadership structure and the ability to kind of create momentum, which I think is part of what was being raised about the concern when under community group it says there's no leadership. So community groups are as led or unled as they want to be, just like this group. If you all just thought I blew a bunch of smoke and Colin and Atul weren't bringing any value, you just wouldn't show up, right? Like community groups are driven by value being perceived by showing up and spending your free time at them, right? With the community group, while it has no formal connection to the TOC and no formal leadership, there is the concept of organizer within the group. And in having some chats, I know Atul has a lot of passion around continuing to support sort of the admin side of managing a community group, where there's that 20 to 30 minutes every other week to just talk about interesting platform engineering concerns that we've been doing in these working groups that allows for the serendipity of identifying and creating initiatives out of the group and then supporting those becoming official TOC official initiatives and that kind of thing. So I think we're still trying to figure that out. But if you have an interest, we've already talked about rotations for co-chairs. If you have an interest in sort of helping to support and grow that community, Atul would be a really good person to reach out to because I think he's going to want to stay on and make sure that thrives as a communication pattern. One thing that we would lose and that we want to have conversations about, just being upfront, is that we've had a tag app delivery booth at the Project Pavilion at KubeCons where we've met a lot of you. That's where a lot of your friendly faces I met for the first time at that booth before you joined us here on these calls. That would not be something that is obvious as to how we would do that again. So that's something that we want to have some conversations about and figure out how we have a presence and a welcoming face to people while at KubeCon. Yes, so that's that. As for the last thing I'll say before back to you two is in thinking about how we're going to break down what we currently do into sub-projects versus initiatives, the one thing I will say that I'm aware of and going to be looking for advice from our current tag leaders as well as from the TOC directly is how to structure the work so that it is impactful and valuable to the TOC and to the structure. The work that we're doing has been extremely valuable to organizations and extremely valuable to the industry at large. It has not helped us fill in some of those gaps that Chris was identifying with like individual projects in the CNCF that do or don't support platform building by the end user community and that kind of thing. So what can and should we be doing to try and actually turn our kind of thinking pieces that we've been producing into impact to actually change how the industry is developing its software and depending on the CNCF4 projects. So that'll be an interesting next step. So just wanted to kind of seed that in people's brains. But Stefan, I think you were first and then Chris.
Yeah, I think it would really be worth asking the TOC, do they see platform engineering in their vision or not, or in the vision of the CNCF or not? Because some things you say sound like they do with the support we get, but at the same time, I don't see how we are in that diagram at the moment. And community group is clearly something that's outside the CNCF scope, if I understand correctly.
Outside the TOC technical leadership, yes. Agreed.
So I think it would be interesting to just ask and see
Absolutely.
what.
I'll take that back and I'll make sure that question gets asked and answered, and you know, whether or not we get, you know, the answer that we're all hoping for, I don't know, but all I could do is go ask and have that open conversation. I might be able to see if we can have representatives come in and have a chat at some point, like if we find that there's confusion still. So yes, this is that's a great question, and I definitely will chase up on that and report back.
So I mean, I think, I think my question was more around just the way you'd phrased that around timescales, and obviously, you know, what's happening with KubeCon, because my understanding was that there were going to be further discussions at KubeCon at Maintainer Day, and that, you know, the dust was going to settle after KubeCon. Certainly, that's kind of what came across on the talk call, and then things would happen after that. So my question was really about, you know, those timescales and what messages and approach are we going to take to KubeCon, because we do have, you know, the platform coffee mornings, we've got platform engineering day. There were a number of things obviously planned, and one of the things we were going to talk about was obviously the booths and messages. There's a lot of good work as a community at Salt Lake. Now really confused about what we're going to do for KubeCon London.
Yes, valid. So I do not have like 100% confidence in the timescales that I understand, and I absolutely agree with you that there is an expectation that London will have a huge opportunity to shape this, because it gives everyone a chance to get together for a prolonged period of time, have those conversations, hash out ideas. I know that Maintainer Summit on the Monday is going to be having two specific sessions. One I think is particularly relevant, and it's going to be about basically a workshop on identifying the initiatives that make sense within this structure, and so helping people to sort of say, yes, that fits the TOC's hopes for this structure. No, it doesn't. Why are so many of these initiatives not fitting the structure? Is there something about the structure that isn't working for people, or is there something, you know, about how we need to change how we think about things? All of that kind of workshopping with members of the TOC and members of the current tags is going to happen. So
and
like definitely, yeah.
Is that just tag leadership, or is that open to
It
others?
does tend to be. So it tends to be, so Maintainer Summit is for people who actively commit to projects and or are in leadership positions within tags. There is an application process, but I know that they do that in part because without it, it's like they get sort of a whole influx of people. So yeah, so just being honest about that. But that's also on Monday, and then there's going to be the next 4 days, the Colo days, and the next 3 to still have conversations. And all of that work is done in public, right? So any of that work, we can be sharing it, we can be, you know, reviewing it, we can all of that. So would want feedback on it. So but yeah, so for timelines, I don't expect anything to be firm before London by any means. And I may have misrepresented that earlier. That was not my intention. The ask from the TOC, my understanding, is to acknowledge and speak to this change at London, but it's not expected that everything is actually implemented or anything like that. So what I mean by that is if you're giving a talk, if someone is giving a talk on behalf of a tag, and that tag is shifting because of this new structure, the hope from the TOC or the ask from the TOC is to not like disregard that this is happening and speak as if you're part of a tag that still exists when that's changing. The world is changing around you. But that's the only explicit ask I know about coming into London. They've been very clear that like there is ongoing work and they're not asking anyone to put that work down. But there will be a process of formalizing that work under this structure over time. So yeah. So timelines are really woolly. I realize I'm not answering you very clearly right now. And as I'll add that to my list of like trying to get more clear answers and report back. It's as clear as I have it right now is what I'm sharing.
Yeah,
so,
it's more on that agreed message, because I think we all did really good shout outs and really good promotion. I mean, look at the number of people that came, you know, the meeting right after Salt Lake, right? We'd all done a massive shout out on all the different talks and things we did, panels, whatever, referencing the group. We're not going to be able to do that this time. So
unless we get a community group set up in time or something else set up in time. Yeah. So yes, agreed. I think we can work towards that. Like, as I said, work is not stopping. We're going to keep having these calls. We've got, you know, 3 more of them, I think, before London. We can have that conversation. We can see if we want to set up a community group. We can see if we want to set up other things. I hear you. I realize I didn't actually answer. I think there was a question as well about Platform Engineering Day. That is completely independent of the TOC. So the Platform Engineering Day, which is on the co-located day event, which has been expanded from a single track to a 2-track event for London, is completely independent of the TOC. And so is Platform Engineering track at KubeCon. There are co-chairs of the KubeCon event who determine the tracks at KubeCon. And yes, of course, they're looking to make sure that they support, what is going on in the cloud native community, which includes what the TOC is working on and driving towards. But it is not under the direct instruction of the TOC in the way that the tags are. So I would not expect the co-located event to go away. I would not expect the track to go away, given the popularity of both of those.
Which just adds to more confusion, right? About if we're still having the day going forward, yet there's nothing in the current structure.
Yeah, and the question is as I said, the question we need to figure out is if being in a tag is necessary for creating influence and impact, right? So we were having one of the conversations we were having yesterday between the current co-chairs is like, where do we see ourselves? And we went through what I'm hearing through a number of voices here today of like, actually, we see ourselves across all of these. We see ourselves a bit in many of them. We really don't see ourselves as purely in developer experience, which is fun because no one says we're purely in developer experience, but everyone's first instinct is to push back on that, right? So there's something clearly there, which is interesting. So a lot of I just want to reinforce that what the discussions and the thoughts going on today are no different than what was happening with the co-chairs. And so we're all on the same page and we're all pulling in the same direction, including the TOC wanting to see impact of cloud native support for building systems. I think that there's going to be some conversation around if platform engineering will divide out significantly across these or find a more the majority home somewhere. And one of the conversations is whether or not operational resilience being a outcome of having a great platform is a home for a large part of what we've been doing, right? If you again, you don't build a platform purely for developer experience or purely for because you're told to by a white paper by the CNCF. You do so because you need the consistency, you need the scalability, you need the security, you need the efficiency for your organization. And that kind of that resilience side of things where it talks about optimization and efficiency and performance and reliability and day 2, those are all things that are often goals of a platform. And so yeah. So I guess I want to be a little bit concrete maybe about people's current thinking. So I realize, as I said, so I haven't said, but I'm obviously trying to distill the information and make sure it's available to everybody, right? That I'm in a little bit of a presenter mode a bit today, unintentionally, but it sort of naturally becomes that when there's a lot of information to try and get across in a consistent way. I am right here with everybody else. By I mean the co-chairs together. So Colin O'Toole and myself are all here working through this problem alongside people. We are not here to dictate a solution. We do not have a solution to dictate. And we all are going to have to go through the same conversations that you all will around where do we spend our time as individuals? Do we as individuals attend meetings for any one or multiple of these tags? Do we as individuals apply for co-chair positions on any one of these tags or for initiatives or sub-projects? And each of you can be thinking on that too. I know that a number of you have reached out to me. I'm going to reach out directly back to talk through what it looks like to be a co-chair in this new world or where you might want to be thinking about in that space. And yeah, so that's a thought. But to be really concrete, one of the things that I think we all felt we didn't want to lose was the level of kind of energy, collaboration, soundboarding that we've managed to curate in this room, especially given that it is speaking at a different level than a lot of the other platform engineering conversations around the world right now and around the industry, because we aren't speaking about projects. Just part of what makes the TOC reorg more difficult for us, but also part of what is part of the charm of this group and part of the power of this group. So we felt like trying to evolve that group into a community group where we still have those calls to identify topics we want to debate. We want to engage in and support things like Content Club, things like that. We wanted to, we felt like would be a great, a great thing to do alongside anything else that we do formally within the TOC structure. But it's only going to be useful if other people think it's useful. So would it be helpful to people to have a similar structured opportunity that was not formalized by the CNCF? Any formal white papers or research projects or anything would need to produce an initiative application and work through the CNCF. They could do so through the community channels if they wanted to, but the community channels would be mainly there to make sure that we continue to have a spot for identifying useful initiatives and discussing our experiences in the wild with platform engineering. How do people feel about that? Would they want to do that? Would that be a waste of our energies?
It feels like it's doubling the work and the workload, to be honest, right? You're now having to attend a community one to discuss that, plus potentially the initiatives. And I know some of us are doing that already, and that is the way that we've naturally started working on some specific pieces of work. But it took us quite a while to get to that point. Yeah, I just think it's a lot more commitment it's asking for with that model, right? You know, whereas the way that the group has worked so far, I know it doesn't align with how the kind of their vision, you know, for software projects. It isn't a software project. We are coming at it with a lot of discussions, and then when we're at a point we're homing in on, right, here's an initiative that we're going to go and work on, and we spin that initiative out. So yeah, I see the pros and cons from their perspective. I just think a community group is just so low level, it's not going to get the same traction we've had as a group being under a tag. That's my concern, to be honest, Abby.
Fair enough. I hear you. Raghu?
Hey, Abby. I'm just trying to process all what you shared today in context of an article that came in InfoWorld today. I'm not sure how many have read you. I can just drop a link. Essentially, how Kubernetes is 10 years old, but that has become a huge kind of many projects. Like, you know, there's almost like 209 projects and 800 repositories and all that. So in the context of what you shared today and some of these things, I think this cloud native landscape being huge and humongous, I think has been heard before. Is there anything that the new structure is going to do to address kind of the sprawl or complexity of these projects?
So sorry, I was looking to see if I get a link to what you were talking about.
I'll
Please
drop a
do
link
drop.
out here.
So just let me repeat and make sure I heard your question correctly. You're asking if there's going to be anything in this new structure that supports the sprawl of the landscape is that right? In the project landscape?
Sprawl, supports,
Yep.
How do we manage the sprawl as well as make it easier for customers to consume this, right? Right now they even give the word that, hey, the CNCF is so big and so sprawling that it's almost like leading to analysis paralysis.
Yes, and that is a very big part of, I think, one of the reasons that TOC wants to invest in this structure, because you know, as I said, I've been a part of this working group for 2.5 years now. And in those 2.5 years, I've had very, very little, if any, interaction with projects in the landscape directly or talking to them or whatever. I have gained insights throughout that 2.5 years that I may have, and therefore opinions maybe of projects that are overlapping or projects that are under invested in or projects that are not evolving to take into account, like, you know, changing landscapes, changing worlds, or missing projects that would be really great to create a bridge between other projects that already do exist, but but have sort of a difficulty in interoperating. That is exactly what they're looking for in the way of initiatives. How do we as the CNCF community identify gaps in the landscape, overlaps in the landscape, confusions in the landscape, opportunities for projects to become less confusing, more approachable, more interoperable? That is the ask. So
how does it make it easier for the customers? Because it's like, it's still this problem might still be there in different different kind of what's it called, whatever the new names are. How does it make it easier for the customers to adopt?
So I don't think that anything about the reorg with naming or changing the shape of the tags is going to make anything more easy to adopt, just being honest. But the push for the ask, where we like refocus the tag work to be focused on projects and technical objectives, and like the pathways for community and tags supporting what the TOC is doing, with one of the key goals of the TOC being a healthy, useful, effective ecosystem of projects. That is basically, so it's in service of that. It's not going to do it by itself. It still is going to be the work that the tags have to put in, basically, is my understanding. And again, all this is just based on my understanding. That might evolve, and I'll be open and honest if anything that I've said is, turns out to be not the correct understanding. So, yeah.
And I think we're going to meet a couple of more times till we sort this out, Abby, or this is closed, or is this working group closed?
No, so the working group, I intend to keep the working group meetings going at least until London. To Chris's point, in London, those are going to be more conversations. So I intend to keep, I speak for the co-leads. We've had the conversation. We're all planning on staying involved and making sure that we encourage and support the right applications into this TOC structure. So, for example, the platform as a product work, is that going to become an initiative? The assessment work on the maturity model, is that going to become an initiative? How do we apply for that initiative if so? All of that kind of stuff is things that we're going to have to do, and we're committed to supporting that. And also, like, we don't want there just to be a cutoff where we all stop talking, and then and then there's multiple weeks or even months before we start finding homes again. So until we feel like the structure is in place for people to attend other community calls that are sufficient for the conversations, that will continue to go. And so that will be at least until sort of end of March, likely end of April will be my guess. So a couple weeks after KubeCon would be my guess.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Chris?
I'd love if we could find some time, maybe not go to the keynotes, you know how much I hate keynotes, where we could actually, meet face to face and have some of these conversations face to face, just the people that are there. My personal hatred, I find sponsored keynotes a waste of time. I think we could actually use that time better for this type of conversation, which is much more meaningful, but just a suggestion.
We will identify a space and time. We might be able to use one of the platform coffees as like a topic space there that people can choose to opt into, or do other platform coffee style chats. Like we can, I hear you. I'll add that to my sort of action list coming out of this, to try and find a time that we can go, and then we start the game of who's available when at KubeCon. It's always a fun game to play. So
that's why I said the keynotes, right? Because everyone knows they're just.
I don't know if I would agree with that statement. So we'll go. But
here's Oracle having paid $1 million to present for 5 minutes.
Cool.
Did I just say that on a recording? Excellent.
I will, but thank you all. I apologize that my voice was so present in today's call. I was just trying to share the information out. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do a bit more brainstorming and problem solving together in the next call, now that the information's a bit more at least visible, if not understood. And I have some questions and some homework to try and come back with some answers to, which I'll do. Yeah, and just keep the conversation going. Reach out to any of our co-leads if you have any questions of either the working group, so call in Atul or myself, or the tag. If you're familiar with them and want to reach out, we are all working towards the same goal. So please just let me know. And we'll
And
see.
thank you, Abby, for all your work on this, and Colin,
worries.
Turo,
Yeah.
everyone else, Robert.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks a
No
lot.
stress.
Hey,
No
by the way,
stress.
before you jump, this platform engineering group is mentioned in that article. In fact, it says the platform engineering is the one that consolidates tools and creates paved roads and all that. I just dropped it into the chat. So take a look. Hopefully we can morph ourselves the right way.
Yeah.
Abby.
And that's that would be, I guess, if I had one takeaway, it would be that there is no indication, there's no reason that this reorganization has to mean that platform engineering is no longer important to the TOC or the CNCF. I appreciate that its words not being on the slide have added confusion, but I can tell you from the conversations I've had, people are extremely thankful and impressed with the work that we've done and grateful that we have curated such a collaborative and diverse group of people working on this. So we have gotten a lot of visibility, a lot of thanks for that work, and that comes down to you all, like to this community actually showing up every 2 weeks, right? Every week. Yes, we will figure out what that means. Yes, I hear you on not having it being formally there generates confusion, and having some clarity from the CNCF would be useful, and we'll work towards all that. But yeah, there's no indication that platform engineering is going anywhere. It's just a matter going anywhere in the way of being important. It's just a matter of how it's being talked about, structured, supported. Cool. Well, I thank you all for spending your time today. Apologize for stealing an extra 5 minutes off of your day. And I look forward to chatting both async over the next couple weeks and seeing you all at our next call. Bye, all.
So, bye.